everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy and I'm so happy you're here. If this is your first time here, welcome, and I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. If you like these projects, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think, and now without further ado, let's get started. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using 2 heart-shaped wind twisters, 2 wooden plaques, some bamboo skewers or wooden dowels, and then some pretty pink flowers and striped ribbon, and then from Walmart I have some lamb's ear. So the first thing I'm going to do is take off the fishing line that's attached to this, and then I'm going to take my wooden skewer and cut that down using my wire cutters or whatever cutter you have. And I want these to be at 2 different levels, so I cut one down to 7 inches and the other one I cut to 11 inches. And then I'm going to take my drill and I'm going to drill a hole right in the center of my wooden plaque and then make sure my dowel fits in there nice and tight so I don't even need any glue. And I did drill down a little bit too far, so I put a divot into my table. So make sure you put something underneath to protect that surface. So now I'm going to take my dowel and I'm going to use some paddle wire to attach it to the back side of my heart. And you'll know that it's the back side because there's a little bit of an indentation, kind of like a stamp, and we don't want to see that. So just make sure that's on the back side. And then I'm going to twist my paddle wire super tight at the top and at the bottom so that my dowel doesn't move and my heart is nice and secure on that dowel. And then I'll stick it back into the plaque and then take it outside to spray paint it. Now when I saw these hearts at the Dollar Tree, it reminded me of a video that my sweet friend Emily at Mama From Scratch did when she was doing some high-end home decor. And she was so sweet to let me borrow her idea, so I will have her video linked in the description box below. So I'm using this Krylon Chalky Finish spray paint in Bonnet Pink, and I have my spray station outside with a Lazy Susan, so I was able to just set that on there and just turn those around and get that spray painted completely all the way around both of my pieces. So now I'm going to take my lamb's ear that I get from Walmart, and this is $2 a bundle, and that has 2 stems in there. And I love how soft and pretty this green is, and that's one thing that Dollar Tree doesn't carry too often. So if you do ever find some, even if you don't need it for a project right then, I recommend getting it while you can. I do, however, love their pretty pink peonies, and so I'm going to pull a couple of those off of the stems and then glue those to the bottom of my base. And then I'm going to take some of that striped ribbon and I'm going to use the fold over method and make 3 loops on each side, and then just make teeny tiny little snips right in the middle on both sides. And then using a chenille stem or wire or whatever you have on hand, just wrap that around the middle and then twist it in the back and then foof out your little loops. And then at the ends, you can either dovetail them or cut them at an angle just to give them a nice edge. And then I'm going to take that and wrap that around the greenery at the bottom, and then that's also going to secure my greenery to that dowel. And then I'll use another peony to cover up the wire in the back. And here's how they turned out, and I love these so much. I love this pink and the green with it and how soft it is. It's so pretty for Valentine's Day. You can set these on a countertop or on a coffee table because it's pretty from all of the sides. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For this DIY, we're going to be using a pair of pink reusable dishwashing gloves, a Valentine's Day infinity scarf, and some pearl wrap. And so the first thing I did was cut my infinity scarf, so now it's no longer infinite. And then I'm going to cut it in half again, going long ways. And I realize it's so thin, I can just roll it up and do it in one shortcut instead of going all the way down the length. And then I'm going to cut that again in half by folding it in half and getting the center, and then I'll cut that in half. And then I'm going to put one on top of the other and let there be a little bit of an overhang on the one underneath. So probably about an inch, inch and a half, somewhere around there. And then I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I'm just going to start threading through using a regular wide stitch to just get that in through both of those layers. And then I'm going to pull my thread and gather that up to make a sweet little ruffle. So now I need to measure the circumference to see how wide that opening is of the glove. So to make it easier to work with, I'm just going to stick a bottle of paint in there, and then I'm going to wrap it around and see where it needs to stop, and then I'll put a knot at the end of that thread so that it doesn't move. And then I'm going to go back in and stitch it with my sewing machine so that everything stays in place. So now I'm going to cut off the excess fabric, and I'm just going to get it as close to that stitch line as I possibly can. And then using my hot glue gun, I'm going to fold over the inside seams where they're going to come together so you won't see this. You could stitch it and make it more secure, but I was just saving a little bit of time. So then I put some hot glue on my ruffle and wrapped it around the bottom of my glove just to hold it in place temporarily so that I could stitch it onto the rubber. So what I'm going to do is use my pearl wrap to kind of camouflage that raw edge and hold it in place. And so I'm going to do a stitch at the bottom of my pearl wrap, and then again at the top of my pearl wrap, just going straight through the grid of those pearls and into the rubber gloves. Now I'm making these just for some Valentine's Day cuteness in the kitchen, so they're not totally functional. But if you're just rinsing dishes and putting them into the dishwasher, I think you could actually use them, until we get to the part where I add a little felt ring just for some more bling. And here they are, all done. They're so cute, you guys. They're making me laugh, and they're on my hand model sister-in-law. She's not digging on doing this. I can't stop laughing. They're so cute, though. Again, so not functional with my little ring on there, but I think for Valentine's Day, these are adorable. I love how they turned out, and I hope you like it too, or at least get a little giggle. So this is actually a thrift to treasure, and I got this clock, which was originally from Target, at the Goodwill for $7, and it's actually an order for a sweet viewer and very patient, Susie, and she had seen me do an Easter clock in another video, and I'll have that video linked in the description box below. But I told her I would do this for her, so if you have an old clock laying around, this is something that you can do and just change it into some farmhouse cuteness using some paint and decals. So the first thing I did was deconstructed the whole clock, and then I'm going to paint inside and cover up all of the numbers and words and give it some gray. I'm using silver lining chalk paint, and I'm adding a little bit of elephant to make it darker and have some nice shading and just look like some rustic old wood. And for the outside of the clock, I'm going to paint that in the Waverly chalk paint in white. So now I'm going to place my decals at the 12 o'clock, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock positions, and each of those times will indicate a significant event that happened on Holy Thursday and Good Friday. So in the 6 o'clock position, we have Last Supper, which was the Seder meal when Jesus and his apostles were celebrating Passover. And then at 9 o'clock the following morning, that's when he was condemned to death by Pontius Pilate. And then at 12 o'clock was when he was crucified and was on the cross. And then at 3 o'clock is when he took his last breath, and that's why it says, "It is finished." So this is a really great way to commemorate what was really going on. I think it brings it to life, and you have a more intimate experience on that day. It's almost like you're living it with him and experiencing the true meaning of Holy Week. Anyway, then I put my clock back together, used some sandpaper to give it some distressing, and then it's done. And here it is, all finished, and I love how this turned out. I really want to keep it for myself, but I know it has to go to Sweet Susie, so I hope you like this, Susie, and I hope you guys like it too. For our next Dollar Tree DIY, I'm going to be using 2 of these wooden hearts and then some black and white gingham ribbon, which I forgot to put in the shot. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull out the jute twine hangers, and then I'm going to use some spackle from Dollar Tree to cover up the holes. And while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and use my Waverly chalk paint in white and paint the 2nd and 4th plank of these hearts. And then for the 1st and the 3rd planks, I'm going to use some ballet slipper with a lot of white and just kind of get that all nice and blended. Before I start painting though, I'm going to get my sandpaper and get rid of the excess spackle once it's dried, and then you can paint right over it. And one thing to remember when you're using the chalk paint in the different colors is that it always dries darker, so even if it looks like there's nothing there, it will show up in the end once it dries. So now I'm going to take my black paint pen and I'm going to write in cursive one word in each section, and it's going to say, "Let all you do be done in love," 1 Corinthians 16:14. And then once I get it written out, I'm going to go back in and do my faux calligraphy, where you make the lines that are going downwards, the downstrokes, you're going to make those a little bit thicker, and then it looks all fancy. So now I'm going to take my sandpaper and distress all of the edges, including inside each of those planks, and then I'm going to take my gingham ribbon and I'm going to run that all the way down the back side of both of my hearts, leaving a little space in between the two. And then you could conserve ribbon if you just did it at the top and bottom of your heart, but I just did it all the way down. And then at the top and the bottom, I'm going to leave about 12 inches of extra ribbon so that for the top, I can tie those all together, and at the bottom, there'll be little hanging pieces. So most of you already know this trick, but in case you haven't seen this before, if you're adding a new glue stick, sometimes it has a tendency to fall out. So if you just add a little dot of glue to it and then stick it in, it'll stay in place. So now at the top, I wanted my ribbons to come together and be tied all at one point, but it was kind of folding over and didn't look right, so I just cut that off and then glued it back down at an angle, so now they'll all meet at the middle. So now I'm going to make a sweet little perky bow using the fold over method, and then I'll attach that in the middle using a chenille stem, and then with the extra chenille stem I'm going to attach that to the top of my ribbons, which I'll tie in a knot so that my big bow has something to hang on to. That'll make sense in a second. I got this larger buffalo check ribbon at Hobby Lobby, and it's regularly priced at $10 for 75 feet, but every other week you can get it at half off. So never, never, never pay full price unless it's a major crafting emergency. So since you was back there, go ahead and make a little hook so that you can hang this on the wall. And then for the little tails hanging at the bottom of our sign, I'm going to cut those at an angle on the outsides, and then in the middle I'm going to do the opposite of a dovetail by folding it over and cutting it downward instead of upward. Now you could leave it like this, and I did like the bow, but I really wanted to use this flower that matched so well. So I went ahead and spread my loops apart and made a regular bow as opposed to a perky bow. And then I put my pretty rose in the middle, and then on one of the loops, I cut it in half to make 2 more tails. So once I got this on the wall, I realized I totally needed that ribbon to go all the way through those blank spots in between the planks. So I had to take teeny tiny little pieces, and using my glue stick, I'm going to put those little pieces in between so that it looks like one continuous piece going all the way down. I thought this was going to take forever because I had to do 18 pieces, but it went really fast because the lines in the gingham helped it, and it only took 1 song on the radio and it was done. And here it is all finished, and I love how this turned out. I love the colors. I love the message. It's so perfect for Valentine's Day, but actually you could keep this up year round. But I love how it turned out, and I hope you like it too. So this next project is from a video I did in June, and it was a BOHO Modern Farmhouse video, so you may have missed it, so here it is. Using 4 of these white and gold frames, this love decal with the pretty flowers on it, this wood arrow which was in the crafters section, and so for this one I took the jute twine off of the arrow and then pulled out the staples that were holding it on there, and then took off the little tag, of course. And then I'm going to use my Waverly wax in antique and just add some water to it, and then do that whole staining process, and then wipe it off with a paper towel, and then go back in with my white chalk paint and soften it up and give it some reverse distressing, I guess you could call it. So I'm just going in with the really dry brush and then adding it to it, and then I go around the edges as well. So I really love this decal, no pun intended, but it was designed to have the LO over the VE, and so it was attached at each of those letters. So I needed to cut those apart because I'm going to attach 1 letter to each of my 4 frames. So I just kind of cut in between, and where there was greenery or any kind of foliage, I just cut some of those leaves and went around it. I'm really liking the quality of the decals that Dollar Tree is carrying right now, and the letters are cut real close to the design, so it doesn't just look like you're sticking a sticker onto something. These are for the wall, but obviously you can use them for whatever you want. So I'm just going to take my frames, and I took out the insides, and then I had some paper, some pink paper. Don't know where the footage went on this either, but I just cut out some pink pretty paper and put that in the backing. And then I'm going to take my decals and put those on top of the glass of each of those frames. These say that they're removable. I probably will never remove them, but if you did want to change it out or change for the seasons or whatever the case may be, you can do that with these. I always like to have things overhang or go out of bounds on some of my projects, but in this case these roses were a little bit too close. There wasn't enough to hang over, so I just opened the frame back up and then laid it down on that glass. And then on the O, it did have a lot that was hanging over, and so I thought that was just super cute. So I just took my squeegee and made sure that it got nice and tight in that corner, and then just overlapped that greenery and the pretties onto the frame. So now I'm going to attach my frames together, and I always double check now because I have been known to put things together backwards. So I did this one spring project and it turned out to say GNURPS instead of spring. So as silly as it sounds, you might want to check it. So then I'm going to take some big craft sticks and hot glue those at the seams, and then that is going to give it some more security. I do keep the stands on the back of the frame so that this can stand up, but you could also hang this on a wall too. So after I get my craft sticks on, I'm going to then take my arrow and go to my miter saw and cut that right in half. And then I'm going to take the front part, the arrow, and I'm going to attach that to the middle of the front of the frames, and then the back part on the other end. And so it's going to look like the arrow is going all the way through the word love. And here it is all finished, and I am absolutely in love with this. This would be perfect for Valentine's Day, but I think love is good any time of the year. So I wanted to incorporate that gold and white, and so again, not having to paint the frames was awesome. And it's super versatile, so you can hang it or stand it, and it was probably the easiest of all of these DIYs, but I think it's one of the cutest. And even if pink isn't necessarily in your color scheme, this just goes to show you that you can find a decal and some frames and embellish it, and you can make something beautiful. And in this case, it costs a total of $6. So I love it, and I hope you guys like it too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using a wooden truck plaque, some wooden hearts, a whole bunch of them, some wooden letters, flexible stencils, and a scrap piece of fence board. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my letters out that I need, and I'm going to be spelling out my truck, and then in stencils, we're going to put runneth over. Do you get it? It's a play on words of Psalm 23:5 that says, "My cup runneth over." And of course, we're not going to notate the scripture because that's not what it really says. So anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is paint my truck entirely white and get a nice thick coat down so that when I put my pink on there, it can get all nice and blended. So I'm going to do that while the white paint is still wet. And I'm going to go around the little fenders and the door area and any place where there might be a natural shadow, just to make it look pretty and more realistic. And then I forgot to cover the holes with spackle, so I did that while I was painting. And I didn't even sand it off, so I just rubbed it with my finger so it was pretty flat. So now I'm going to take my chalk paint in ink and I'm going to paint in my tires, and I'm doing this while the white paint is still wet, so it's going to kind of blend in and give it some highlights. And then I'll also paint the edges where my tires are and make sure that all of that is covered up. So now I'm going to paint my wooden letters, and I got this tip from a sweet viewer who said to take a piece of painter's tape turn it upside down, and then stick your letters to it so that they're not moving all over the place. And this did make it so much easier to do. So thank you for that tip. So now I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in white and I'm going to paint my fence board. And because this is like a redwood material, it does kind of seep through and turn my bright white paint into more of an off-white, which is fine. But I'm going to give this 2 coats and I'm going to make it kind of a lighter coat where I do leave some of that wood exposed just to give it a more rustic look. And I'm using my Chandler heat tool to speed up the dry time in between coats. And a sweet viewer, Jeannie, sent this to me, but I have it listed in my Amazon store under crafting supplies. So now to lift my truck and give it a little more dimension, I'm going to take 2 tumbling tower blocks and using some E6000 and my glue gun, I'm going to attach those pieces to the back side of my truck. And then on the other side, I'm going to use again my E6000 for the permanent hold and my hot glue gun for the temporary immediate hold to place that onto my board towards the front. Now I'm going to take my words and I'm just going to kind of set out where they're going to be because I'm going to do my stenciling first and then I can move my wooden letters around it. So to get my stenciling straight, I'm going to use a piece of painter's tape and make a straight line, and then I'm going to lay my stencil on top of that and I'll line up the entire line of letters so that I make sure that it's nice and level. And then I'm using a makeup sponge from Dollar Tree, and these are a little bit different than they used to be. They're not quite as dense, so you have to be really careful with it. And there's not a lot of room in between the letters, so you do have to make that kind of crunched down and small so that you don't go into the next letter. And then I'm just going to keep going until I get my words onto my board. And I'm using ballet slipper without any white to add a little bit more pink prettiness. So now I'm going to pull up my painter's tape, and anytime I pull up anything with an adhesive backing off of a painted surface, I like to go really slowly so that you don't risk pulling up any of that paint with it. So now I'm going to take my hot glue and I'm going to glue my letters down, and then I'm going to start adding my hearts. So these wooden hearts have little adhesive dots on the back of them, so they kind of stand up already, but I want all of my hearts to be overlapping and, well, to runneth over. So I'm just going to kind of lay out and see how many I have in each of the colors, and then I'm just going to disperse them through the whole top of the board. And I'll use the large ones on the bottom and then build up gradually with the smaller ones in all of those pretty colors. So then one of the packs includes these little arrows, so I'm just going to take that adhesive dot off of the back and then just add hot glue and place that on my truck door. Then I'm going to take some sandpaper and just rough up the edges, get it all nice and distressed, and it's done. And here it is, all finished, and this is my favorite. I love this so much. And this is so perfect for any piece of scrap wood, but if you don't have any scrap wood, you could always use one of the longer signs that Dollar Tree carries. It just wouldn't be as long as this one. So I just love how long it is. I love all the pretty hearts, and I think Valentine's Day is the perfect time to have glittery things, but I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and we now have a Patreon account where you can become members and receive all kinds of fun perky prizes and discounts and all kinds of fun stuff. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!